Hello and welcome back to the When You're Podcast, the podcast for when you're doing anything. Today we're talking about when you're watching Shōgun. Guys, I cannot state enough how good this show is. And look, I'm not usually the type of person that goes like, there have been multiple amazing shows, but sometimes when they do like a time period piece, or it just kind of feels like, oh, they're just setting it in the past just to kind of do it like everybody else is doing it, or they do a period piece every so often, or like a TV show or a series of it, and I'm kind of like a little disinterested in it. I'm kind of over it. I'm just like, there's no historical accuracy to it. They just kind of do it for obviously it's for storytelling purposes, for fiction, but every time they do it, I don't know, I don't feel the weight of it. I don't feel like I enjoy it all that much as much as I kind of used to. Like movies that I grew up that were quote unquote period pieces or were set in the past were like Pirates of the Caribbean stuff, and those movies were fun. They're still great to this day, but I don't know how much nostalgia plays a part in that. And now, whenever I think of like people doing maybe kind of like a rewrite of the past, or whenever they try to do modern historical fiction, it just doesn't land or hit the same anymore. So when they came out with this, I immediately thought of the movie with Tom Cruise, The Last Samurai, because I was kind of like under the impression that that's what it was kind of gonna follow, and they had the same actor that was in that movie, the Last Samurai. So I kind of felt like, oh, they're just doing a repeat of it, and they're just kind of doing it in a TV show series, and I was kind of skeptical of it at first, and I didn't really pay that much attention to it. But then everybody was talking about how great it was, and I saw the trailers for it. You know, they played it in like, I guess, some movie theaters, or they played it on they have it on ads during YouTube, I think, or whatever I was watching at the time. Anyways, they were really hyping it up, and the reviews came out great. You know, they gave it like a 9.4, or they said it was completely fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Like, they were really hyping it up, but I feel like sometimes they kind of they tend to overglaze, you know. I mean, they glaze it a little too hard, and then a couple more episodes in, it kind of goes down, you know what I mean? Once they release one episode. But I can honestly say, after the first episode, I was in. I was ready for more. And thankfully, I waited until the whole thing came out. It was really amazing. But I think what really helped me dive deeper into it was the historical aspect of it, the time period when they were kind of in conflict, or what the world was going through at the time. So essentially, and spoilers for Shōgun, I can't speak freely about this show. So if you're listening to this and you have not watched it, I highly, highly, highly recommend you watch it. It is without a doubt a top tier show. I can't express enough how great the dialogue is. There were so many moments in the show. And remember, spoilers. Okay, there were so many points in the show where the characters would say something, and then I would respond as myself. You know, they would say, sometimes when I watch movies or I watch TV shows, they will say something and then I'll kind of respond in the way that I would respond. And the TV show or the movie, they wouldn't respond in the same way, or they wouldn't be like trying to fight or get into trouble. You know what I mean? Like, I'm the type of person that kind of like, obviously, because it's a movie, it's not me actually in there, but I'm like always choosing violence. I'm always like, oh yeah, you're gonna kill me, pull the trigger. You know what I mean? I'm kind of that guy when you're in those moments where it's like gun to your head and it's a life or death moment, and I'm just like, do it, you know? So it was refreshing when I was watching the show. There was a moment where essentially the main character name is John Blackthorne, I think. I hope it's John. I might be confusing it with like another J name, but John Blackthorne, or yeah, I think it's Blackthorne. Anyways, the main character is being offered or given gifts, or he's essentially being given well, I don't want to say privileges. He's getting a lot of stuff for whatever reason. I don't know. And he was kind of like, I don't want it. I don't really care about this stuff. And then he has a translator, and she's kind of telling him, well, if you refuse it, it's kind of disrespectful, or, it would would be dishonorable to reject them, or to refuse it would be the wrong thing to do, You have to accept them, otherwise our Lord Toranaga will be very upset, or might kill you, or could even do something horrible to you. And he's essentially, I don't pause it, but I kind of go speak in my head. I say, then I refuse. I don't care if it's a great disrespect. I'm like, I refuse. I disrespect him. I disrespect everything that he stands for. I disrespect his this or that, right? Like, I disrespect him. I refuse. And then he says that, and I'm like, that's what I'm talking about. That's the kind of writing that I like. That's the kind of moments where it's like, he doesn't care about being the bad guy, or he doesn't care if he's on the mean side of things, because earlier in the show, he got it really bad, but he's not afraid of it. You know what I'm saying? He's really good at it. And I enjoy that kind of dialogue. I enjoy those kind of moments where they push against that friction. I really like it. But again, the time period, the world, it's set in the 1600s, and I think they do a pretty good job of conveying that. I'm not like an expert in architecture, but I can only assume that they did historically accurately. I can't confirm it, you know what I'm saying? I'm not I didn't go to Google 1600s Japanese homes or anything like that, but they seem very traditional. They seem like they make sense, right? They fit. So I feel like what was needed in this era, or like what was needed in this time, was like a little bit of that understanding of what's going on in the world. The world is at war. The spreading of religion, they're very big on Christianity, Catholicism. There's Protestants. There are, they don't show any people, any Jewish or any other religions, except for those. But it's kind of implied that Spain or Portugal's expansion are kind of set up in I don't want to say in a weird way, but in the show it is explained. I do a terrible job butchering it right now, but I could explain it, but we'll get to that later. So knowing what's going on, there has to be conflict. It's It's the it's the 1600s. Of course, there's conflict. We know that the world is going to be constantly at war. There's going to be trading goods. There's going to be people who want land. There's going to be people who want to take over places and people and what they do and stuff. And in this world, in this time period, there are 5 regions. Essentially, I'll call them like a council of people who, quote unquote, own Japan, or like have their own places for themselves. Essentially, what I'm trying to say here is that they're rulers of Japan, and each 5 of them are part of a council, and they have to work together to be leaders. I may be phrasing it wrong, but that's kind of what the basic gist of it is. And the one that we are closely associated to, or the one that we kind of root for, is kind of the quote-unquote black sheep of them all, which is Toranaga, who is played by the guy in The Last Samurai. Man, I'm blanking on his name. I talked about him in Bullet Train. He was in that movie too. Fantastic guy, but I do feel like they always, and in this instance, it works, but I feel like they always cast him as the Yakuza or the Japanese sword fighter. You know what I mean? It's just like, give him something else to work with. But anyways, in this show, man, does he steal it. It's really, this is perfect for him. It's just like top of the line. So essentially, he's kind of defiant of all of the 4 other regions, and the rest of them want to impeach him and quote unquote kill him, take him out of power. So that way the other one, I guess the main one that opposes him or hates him or dislikes him, Ishido, can be the sole ruler, quote unquote, right? And I just feel they do such a great job of the dialogue, and the way that they write the show makes it so it feels like his one value, his leadership, or his skills, or his position is used in the best possible way to turn everybody against one another. So, for example, he understands the rules that the regents have to follow because he's a part of the council. He's a part of them. So, in order for them to vote on impeaching him, they need 5 votes, right? And the way that it would work is 4 of them would vote to impeach him, and he would vote to not impeach himself. So it would be 4 against 1, right? So those are the 5 votes, okay? And because he's overruled, he's outnumbered in his votes, he would lose it, right? Now, this is where it gets interesting. Maybe I shouldn't just describe the plot, but anyways, he decides to essentially quit. He resigns his seat. He resigns his seat amongst the council, and therefore he's not a part of it. But in order for them to fully impeach him, they have to vote to impeach him. And because there's only 4 of them now, they need to get somebody else on the council to vote him out, to impeach him, or to at least kill him, sentence him to death. So now that he's gone, they have to find a 5th member, and finding a 5th member is a bit difficult because all 4 of them are conflicting with each other, and now there's no balance because 2 of them could feel like this candidate is good, and 2 other council members or regents could think that another person is good, and it just forces them to turn against each other. There's no, that's why the fifth member, that's why it's odd. You know what I mean? It's an odd number of people on the council, so that way they can balance it out, you know? Two people agree this way, two people agree that way, and then the fifth one can kind of sway the decision. But now that there's only four of them, they can't do that. And gosh, that's one of the smart ways that they handle the writing. I also want to say that, again, what really sunk me into the story was really the historical aspect of it. It definitely felt like I was in Japan during the 1600s. They made Japan look so beautiful. They make Japan seem so close and like a real community, really tight together villages. It made it seem so real. And I enjoyed, like I said, you know, the accuracy of the set designing and of the clothes that they wore and the armor, the kind of shoes and whatnot that they wore, the things that they did. It all kind of was accurate to me. But again, I couldn't, you know, tell you if it was or wasn't. Anyways, because it's set in Japan, we try to understand the politics or the overall region, or like, what's the right word? Because it's like when you're in a state, right? Here in the United States, when you're in like the state of Texas, right? You only care about what's going on in Texas. You don't care about, oh, what are they doing over there in Idaho? Per se. You know, I'm just using a dumb example. You're focused on the inner workings of your state, but there is a possibility, or there are other states, each with their own ideas and feelings about your state. Like some people say that I don't want to get in trouble here, but let's just say that they think that people from Texas are too overweight. Let's just say that, right? So then they make rules, or they cast judgment, or they do other stuff. So because it's set in Japan and we see what goes on there, we understand like their rules and their customs, their culture, you know? But other characters who, like John Blackthorne, who they call a barbarian, Anjin. He comes from other places in the world, and we kind of see his perspective on things. We kind of see how the rest of the world views Japan, or what they think about them, you know? And I feel like that kind of world building, or that understanding, really, it really interested me. I really liked that aspect of it. I also have to say, oh man, the characters are so real. They feel so perfect in a way that's like you could actually feel like this is how people were back then, or how they felt, or the conflict within themselves, within the world that they live in, within the differences of opinions and the way that people live their lives. Like there was a huge disconnect, and there is nobody I liked in that show more than John Blackthorne. I hopefully I'm saying his name right. I feel like I'm getting it right, but man, that guy, when you see him in the beginning to where he ends up at the end of it all, at the end of the show, I mean, that actor does such an incredible job of balancing fear and confusion and strength and perseverance and an overall sense of like fighting for yourself, fighting for life, fighting for something that you know that you have to do, you know? And I really connected with him. And there were so many times I was watching it because he's supposed to quote unquote represent us, the viewers. We kind of, I don't want to say he's the only one I connected with on the show, but I just feel like I guess his ideas, or maybe his philosophy of life mostly fits with Western values as opposed to the Eastern values in Japan. So I found myself agreeing with him, and also sometimes maybe disagreeing, or maybe wishing that he said something a little bit different or acted a different way. But he's not a perfect person, you know. He's flawed as well. But the character from beginning to end was absolutely outstanding, and I guess that is a bit of a spoiler. So, but I did say spoilers. Anyways. Oh, and one more thing about him. There were so many moments where I felt like he could have died, or you know, the whole time I'm watching the show, I guess it was like halfway through, I kind of gave up and was like, he's going to be okay. He's going to live. He'll make it through until the last episode. But I felt like I was on the edge of my seat watching him do stuff, because I was just like, at any given time, you know, I didn't feel like he was super important to the story, that they needed him anymore, but I also felt like, let's see what else he can do. Let's see what else he can cook up. Let's see how he can make it. Another character that I really connected with, and it's not just because she's really beautiful. It's because of the way that they really showed what she goes through, or her thought process, or kind of her feelings, you know, what she has to endure, what she kind of has to take. And it's Mariko-sama. She was absolutely outstanding in this. You know, that actress, she delivered a top tier performance that throughout the whole show, I was really interested in learning more and more about her. And I think I wanted her to keep on doing what she's been doing, but understanding that certain things needed to happen, or she needed to accept certain things, or confront. I think that's a better word. She needed to confront things about herself in order to really live, to really stand proud and be happy with the way that she did things, you know? So I don't think I want to go any deeper than that, but all I want to say is that Mariko-sama, man, fantastic work. And then there's obviously Toranaga, who steals the show. I mean, every time he pops up, which is why I think it was pretty smart that they took him out a few times. You know, there were a few moments where I was like, where is he? Like, I want his thought process. I want to know what he's thinking, but it was a build up, you know. They don't give you the whole thing all at once. They get you to slowly build up and figure it out. And there was a great moment between him and John Blackthorne where he wants to learn how to dive, and John is like constantly jumping off the ship and diving into the water, into the ocean, to teach him. And it was a fun moment between the two of them, or I felt, about him and Toranaga kind of having this place where they both were swimming together. This lord, this ruler, and this barbarian, or this guy from another world, this white man, so to speak, were able to be together and able to talk amongst each other. Able to get, what is it called? Have a moment between the two of them that was fun. And then there's also the other four council members that I really like. There was also, I mean, there were just so many good characters that were completely different, that were so unique in their and the way that they thought, you know what I mean? And the way that they felt, or the way that things mattered to them. And so it was always a toss up between those two. And then also, as you watch the show, you just kind of, obviously, you can tell that there's just different ways of living. You know, obviously, it's cultural, right? The different ways of them living their lives, or the way that they eat, the way that they sleep, the way that they kind of live is so different. And it's kind of a fun different. As I'm watching the show, I'm like, I would live in that village. Like, I like that village. I like walking around, or I enjoy, you know, the way that the house looks, right? But then I'm like, well, I can't have a house like that because everybody will tell me I'm culturally appropriating, so it's probably not the right thing to do. But I don't know, there was something so beautiful and awesome about it that I really felt, I really watched it and was like, it's so cool the way that they do things. It's so different. And I think I could maybe get used to it, but the difference is that, like, they have staffs, they have staff members, they have people who tend to the garden, they have people who, you know, prepare your meals and give you baths and whatnot. So it's just like, they don't really do that anymore, or maybe they do, but anyways, it just really it just really made me feel something, a difference in the way that I think, in the way that I feel. And then understanding that culturally we're kind of the same, but very different. You know, we all want good food and meals, and we have like a dining place, but we all kind of eat different foods, or we think, what is the right word? We're the same, but we're different. You know what I mean? They have a dining room. We have a dining room. We do it on a big table with chairs. They do it on the floor with with trays, with different foods, and they eat with chopsticks, not forks or spoons, right? And that's evident. And when John Blackthorne tries to feed them rabbit stew and they hate it and they're like, throw that away, you know? They're just so different, but very much the same. And in watching it and in seeing the characters kind of philosophies battle out for who is right, and I feel like you can't really go wrong either way. I mean, some of it you may think is absurd, or I may think is absurd, but to them it makes all the sense in the world, or it fits for them. You know, it's something that they're willing to believe in, or willing to die for, or live for. You know, is that what makes it right? And I keep thinking in my head, well, I wouldn't feel like that, or I feel in my core, I wouldn't believe those things, or I wouldn't act that way, or no matter what I was raised in. But then I think about it, I was like, well, that's just the time, you know? There was no, everything I've learned up to this point, there was no internet, there was no differences of opinion, there was no talk about like free thinking, or doing what you want, or freedom and all that stuff. There's only what somebody else commands you to do, and you do it, you know, because it's what's honorable. And I just feel like, I don't know, I found myself kind of being like, well, you know, watching the show, I'm kind of thinking to myself, well, I wouldn't act like that as I am now. But if I was there back in that time, yeah, I probably would be just like them. I'd probably follow the same rules, act the same way, speak the same way, talk. And their haircuts, oh my gosh, their haircuts. I'm like, why do they have it like that? You know, there's a priest in this one, and I'm just looking at him. I'm just like, he's so goofy looking like that. But I don't know. Maybe that's the style. Yeah, I can't say anything. But there's another part of it that I really enjoyed, which was the adaptability that we see John Blackthorne kind of go through. His ability to adapt, his ability to change or to quote unquote be a part of Japan. No, however reluctantly, you know, he kind of feels like he's not a part of Japan, but he also doesn't feel like he's a part of England anymore either, or that those the people that he sailed on shore with are not the same as they used to be, or they feel different, you know. There's that kind of internal conflict, that clash of like, who do I side with, you know? I don't feel like I belong here in Japan. I also don't feel like my men or the people that I thought I knew aren't who I thought they were, or they're completely different, or I don't feel like I belong with them either. So I just have to choose myself, you know. I have to stay with myself, and I really like that the way that they made that, you know, that I feel like I say that too much. How he adapts, and as I'm watching it, I'm going, I would immediately try to adapt. I would figure it out, you know, and in trying to figure it out, I would become better. I would become smarter. I'd become a lot more capable, and that's what matters. And in doing so, you kind of understand others and what they talk, how they talk, what they say to each other, why they say certain things. You don't have to have a translator with you at all times, although I like that aspect. Well, you know, you can clearly and plainly tell how people are feeling, or what they say, or what they mean. You know, what do they feel? You know, understanding their place in the world, or the things that they've gone through. Understanding what honor means to them. Understanding the eightfold fence, right? Understanding somebody who's capable of going on, like, let's say, autopilot, just so that way they can daydream and think of a better life, a new escape, somewhere where they're free from any burdens or obligations or depressive thoughts, you know? A place where they can be protected and safe and warm. Being able to understand others, but also disagree with them, but at least be honest about who you are and what you feel, what you think. That's something that we do, but it just kind of feels like we don't speak the whole truth, right? We sometimes hold back, or we don't say the complete honesty of it all, because sometimes the truth hurts. But all I'm trying to get at here is, in the show, there are I keep on saying philosophy, but it's just like differences of opinion. They disagree, but they're honest with the way that they feel. And in that honesty, they're really able to not necessarily get along, but at least, like I said, understand each other. And that's what I really liked about this show. And then the big thing that they kind of dealt with, or the thing that they talked about, was life and death. You know, life and death are, they say in the show, is like, they're the same. You know, what do we live for? And in the show, they kind of make it clear that they live for their master, their lord. They do what he says because they're loyal to him. They're loyal, and they will follow it because it is their duty. It's what they're there for, you know, to live for that. But at the same time, it's like, what's they're also willing to die for? What that's how they're the same. They're willing to die for him. They're willing to live for him. They're willing to do whatever he says because he is their leader, their master, their whatever. You know? They're similar in that sense, but there's another quote that they say is that like your life is yours and mine is mine. So it's perfectly okay to be loyal, but understanding that your death, or I guess kind of a conflict of it all, is that like your death doesn't have to be that death. It doesn't have to be. Sometimes it's not meaningful. Sometimes it's like there was no reason for that death. Like there's a time in the show where they gift a pheasant to John Blackthorne, and he kind of says, in passing, well, not in passing, but he hangs the pheasant up so that way it can age properly, and because it's aging properly, it'll get rotten, and because it rots, it stinks, right? And he kind of tells his staff and his crew or whatever at the house, he says, don't take it down. All right, he's trying to speak Japanese, or he's trying to get them to understand. He doesn't want them to take it down so that way it'll age, and that way when he cooks it, it'll taste really good. But they don't see it that way. They're just kind of like, it's going to be stinky and it sucks, You're going to stink up the whole place. Anyways, he kind of tells them in Japanese, it's like, hey, if you touch it, you'll die. You know what I mean? Like, you touch the pheasant, you die. Because I don't want anybody moving it. And he kind of says it in a passing way. And for me, I kind of wrote it off. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, okay. He just like really wants them to stay away from it, And some time passes, and it turns out the gardener that works for Blackthorne, he took it down because it was stinking so bad and it was disturbing the peace of the whole village and the house. So he took it down, and then his quote unquote caregiver, or the head of the house, which is another woman who works for him, she kills him because he told them not to touch it. And since he touched it and took it down, they killed him for it. And Blackthorne is very deeply disturbed, as was I. I was like, no, not him. I was like, he was just a nice guy, old man. And he kind of gave his life meaning to it because he was like, well, I'm feeling sick anyways. I might as well do it. It'll be a good thing for me to die. And I was just like, there was no point in killing that man. And he was kind of telling everybody, why didn't you talk to me first? Why did you kill him? He didn't need to die. I didn't care about the bird. It was like, why did you shoot him? I didn't want him to die. Why did you do it? Like, can't you guys think for yourselves? Can't you guys like put it together? Don't just follow the things like that. And then his housekeeper, the house leader, the leader of the staff, kind of goes like, your words are what gave it meaning. Because you said not to touch it, you'll die. As soon as he touched it, I had no choice but to do what you told me. Because I'm loyal to you. Because you said not to do that. That's why he died. And in that moment, he kind of realizes the power of his words, or we are capable of giving meaning to things. So, as, for me, I wouldn't have killed him for touching the pheasant. I would have been like, I would have accepted the consequences for sure. But, again, I'm not them, I just really like that message, is that like, your words are what gave it meaning. If all of a sudden I look at a lamp and I decide that it's of great importance, of great value to me, for no other reason than, let's say I like the color. Oh, it's the color green. So therefore, it's going to give you great wealth and prosperity. So I, quote unquote, we give things meaning, Your words are what give it meaning. And I thought that was a really powerful message. It's just like, be careful with your words, you know? I really like that. And then I guess the last thing I kind of want to touch on is like how sometimes we can be stupid. We can be stupid sometimes. We can fight the wrong fights or do some of the wrong things, but what happens when we actually make it come true? There's a point in the story, pretty early on, where he has a discussion with Toranaga, and it's a pretty important discussion. You know, it could mean the difference between life and death. And essentially, what he describes is, I'm going to fight my enemies. You know, I'm going to kill them, and I'm going to take charge at them head on for this war. And Toranaga kind of looks at him and is like, you're an idiot, you know, because you're outnumbered. You don't stand any chance against them. How are you going to possibly, you know what I mean? It's like, you're a fool to fight them. And he's just like, yes, I'm a fool, but, you know, he's, man. I forget the exact phrasing that the Toranaga said to him. He was like, you know, you're an idiot. You don't know what you're doing. And he's like, you're right, but I'm only stupid if I lose, right? He's like, only if I win, right? Only if I win does it not seem impossible anymore. You know, I think that's what he said. He was like, it's impossible. You don't stand a chance. He's like, you know, you can't do it, or it's a difficult task. And he's like, right, but it's not stupid if I win. If I win, I can effect change. I can change the whole world if I win. So, I don't know. I really like that saying. It's like, it's nobody cares until everybody cares kind of a thing, right? Until you actually actively participate in the world that you live in, you know? Make the life that you want, you know? So, Shōgun, what an amazing show. I definitely recommend it. 10 plus hours of straight heat. It was absolutely one of the best shows I'd watched in a long time. And I don't know, I look forward to, well, I don't think they're coming out with more, but man, there's so many beautiful moments, so many great scenes that I think I'm going to revisit a lot as like references for what people can do. And comparatively between this and The Last Samurai, they kind of speed it up. You know, it's a movie. They make it really quick. And which is why I think the benefit of doing a long-term show like this is being able to show, you know, the growth of the characters and what they do. Like, imagine if we saw the story of The Last Samurai and this full kind of like, and this full 10 plus hour season, you know, I think the story would be even more enriching. I think it would be a lot better. But, you know, those are the differences. They're both still really good. I still really like The Last Samurai. But I think about like, oh man, what if they made it into a TV series, you know, at the time? What if they made it like a whole TV show? And like they did Shōgun, you know? I think it could have been just as amazing. But the movie's still great. And Shōgun is definitely a top tier show. I just want to say I am definitely going to look at it with a different perspective and like what's the word? I guess more of like a understanding or more. Well, once you see the full picture, right? Like the first time I watched it, of course, you're interested. You don't know where things are gonna go. You don't know what's gonna happen. But now that you know, rewatching it, you're like, oh, okay, that was that's what's going on, or that's how these things are connected, or you know what this person's thinking or feeling, and like now it's not much of like a you figuring it out or being surprised by it. Now it's kind of you're in the know now, and everything's gonna be cool. You know what I mean? So yeah. Anyways, go watch it, and thank you guys so much for listening. I'll talk to you guys all next time. Thank you.